I'm Jeremy Toeman, and today on Founder at 50, my guest is David Cohn. David's a journalist turned product innovator who spent the last 2 decades shaping how news stories are told, shared, and funded online. From launching the early crowdfunded news platform Spot Us to leading product strategy at Circa and AdvanceLocal, David has consistently found ways to connect people with the information that matters. I really enjoyed discussing with David how his career is like a set of albums, like the dance remix and some demos I recorded in my basement. David also happens to be my first internet friend, and we'll reminisce about some of the early days of blogging and citizen journalism. As we chat, David reflects on his shifts from journalism to product and the power of remixing past ideas with new technology like generative AI. If you care about media, innovation, or what it takes to build something really meaningful, this one's for you. David, how are you today?
I'm good, Jeremy. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm so excited for this conversation because here's our little reveal. You're my first internet friend.
Same. We are each other's first internet friends.
I would love for you to share our little journey, just what you remember of it, just because I think it's such a fun little story. And then we'll hit with how we got to here.
Yeah. So this was, I want to say it's like 2004-ish, give or take. And I was an intern at wired.com.
Right.
And I was, a journalist, a young journalist. And I was like, I wanted to write for as many different things as possible. This is early web. Blogging is a thing. And maybe it might have even been on Craigslist. I don't know. There was a posting for people to write on a blog called Live Digitally. And I responded to it. And then this guy, Jeremy, reached out and was like, hey, I've got this blog. It's going to be, about tech. I think might have even been more about gadgets at the time. I can't remember. It was, a lot of things, but a lot of gadgets. And I just started writing for it. And we just, hit it off from there and back and forth. And again, there were other folks around that time that maybe I'd started reaching out to in other ways that have come and gone and never, but we have stayed in touch. We didn't even meet in person, I think, until years later, despite staying in touch through the internet for years before I think we met in person.
Yeah, I think it was about 7 or 8 years. And now the part that I recall, and now my memory's gotten a little fuzzy of everything. I call it the COVID memory vortex. We met at a party for Bug Labs in New York City. At the time I was running a small consultancy. Bug Labs was one of my clients. We didn't even know we were going to be at this thing, right?
Nope.
Like I remember walking by, I actually can picture the moment where I'm like, is that David Cohn in person? And I think you had sort of a similar kind of, hey, wait, are we actually here? Is this happening? It's like the meme.
That's exactly how it went. Yeah.
Yeah. And and so we're at, like 19, 20 or so years of knowing each other. And what is fun about this is since our starting point is a lot about your starting point is in your career, let's go back to there and then we'll again proceed into the future or into the present. Quick version, but where'd you go to school? And then how did you end up from there? Let's go into that Wired internship and what happened right after that.
Sure. Well, I went to school at UC Berkeley and I studied philosophy and rhetoric, which I like to joke are both useless. And it was around senior year that I started getting into journalism. And I can even trace that. I was part of a group that created an undergraduate philosophy journal. And at the end of it, loved having created this booklet, but was over philosophy. I was like, I never want to see or write another philosophy paper.
Was it like the McSweeney's for philosophy?
It was like the McSweeney's for philosophy. Exactly.
Okay. Because if you were going to be involved, I can't imagine there wasn't at least a mild hipster angle to it.
There was.
Okay.
A lot of art, but it was philosophical art. And then from there, I went even more McSweeney's. I went to the literary arts journal because I was like, I liked producing this. And that was too much poetry, a little too artsy.
Okay.
And then someone's like, oh, you should go to the Daily Cow, the student newspaper. And I wrote something I know nothing about journalism, right? And I wrote something for them, loved it, and was like, this is what I was looking for. And so, as I graduated, sent hundreds and hundreds of applications out, didn't hear from anything. This is when you had to print out resumes and put them in the mail. So I'm in San Francisco and I had a job at the JCC, the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco. Watch this. Shalom, JCC. This is David. How can I help you?
You weren't dropping philosophy
No. I'm just trying
The
to,
JCC
and
Philosophy Monthly.
and I was, kind of scrounging, surviving together in San Francisco. I saw an internship at Wired. It paid, which was amazing. I don't remember what it paid. I did have another internship at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco. Get this,
Okay.
it paid $45 a month.
Wow.
Which was the cost of a bus pass at the time. So it covered your bus pass. I get an opportunity to intern at Wired, and I was really lucky in my timing because an assistant managing editor left for maternity leave, and so they just kept me on. And nobody told me to leave, and so I just kept staying. And in addition to like my sort of daily duties that I had to do for them, which was paid, they would let me pitch. And here's, again, the interesting part and an inflection in my entire life. Before Wired, I was not actually into technology. I was like, again, I studied philosophy and rhetoric in college. I was a little bit of a hippie, maybe, I wasn't like a Luddite or against, but it was just sort of there. It was only because I was at Wired and that became kind of my beat as a young reporter. I was like, okay, if I'm going to get the opportunity to pitch these guys, I better study up. And I just dove in. And now I ended up applying sort of this. I realized what I was interested in philosophy was the exchange of information, and technology and journalism hitting each other. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most fascinating thing.
Interesting.
And that led to everything else that followed, essentially.
So you were disingenuous with me when you came to be my intern as well?
No, I was already at Wired. I was diving in. That was me diving in head first.
All right, so let's use this moment. So you're at Wired, you're getting, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, tech's really cool. And realistically, you're also in the, oh my gosh, journalism's really cool. So at that point, did you have a vision? Did you have I want to be the managing editor of Wired one day or run my own publishing company? Was there, or just let's see where the heck this adventure goes?
A little bit of both. I mean, again, this is 20 years later. Like, at the time, I wanted to be a writer, right? Like I wanted to be like long form magazine journalist, right? Which again, Wired was like, and to be clear, I was at wired.com, which was separate from the magazine, but it's a great place to start. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like a hop, skip, and a jump away from like one of the great, magazines in the tech space. I was getting into tech. It was, but yeah, I was very much wanted to be, I would have been, by what I call today a journalist, which I'm not, that anymore. Kind of talk about that. But, I had a sort of like fedora hat, cigarette smoking kind of dream.
Okay. And so bluntly speaking, what'd you do about it? What happened next?
So a couple things. Wired was great. Again, they didn't let me, I could have actually stayed there. Small side note. I could have stayed there for another 10 years. When I left, there's chaos at this time, and they let me hire my replacement essentially. And I knew my roommate's boyfriend wanted to come in. He ended up getting hired, and he stayed at Wired for another 10 or 15 years. So that could have been me. But I moved to New York. I was like, I'm going to go to grad school. And
I want to hear, why did you decide you had to do grad school?
Again, this was that, I wanted to go to grad school for journalism, right? I wanted to go to Columbia Journalism School. I think that was just like, oh, that's the next step in, and again, 20 years later, did I need that? No. Do I recommend that to journal? No. But at the time I was like, oh, I'm going to go to New York. One, I think it was, I'm 20, I don't remember, I'm 23 or 24. And it's just like, one, I think New York had an appeal to me. I had friends that were there, and it's just like, yeah, let's do it. Let's be the hipster that I've always wanted to be. And again, that like, cigarette smoking, hat wearing journalist in New York, right? Like there was an appeal there.
Sure.
And I think I'm still young to the point where I need to sell this vision to my parents as well. Don't worry, your son's not wasting his life. And grad school, that buys you some time, right? That sounds great. And I did it again in a slightly different way. Or again, I started applying to different things, and I get, again, a paid internship at Columbia Journalism Review.
Okay.
Columbia Journalism Review is a magazine about the media industry. It's on campus, but it's not part of the university. I'm like, oh, this is great, because the managing editor does teach at the school, but it's not part of the school. So I moved to New York because of this job. It's a part-time job, and I'm freelancing. I keep freelancing for Wired. Now I'm in New York. I do stories from New York for them. I go to Bug Labs, like parties, things like that. And I'm freelancing. I work at a place called Seed Magazine. Two small updates or interesting things. One, and this is at Wired, I discovered dig.com. You remember Dig, right?
Sure.
And for those who don't know, think Reddit, but there was no Twitter, there was no Reddit, there was just Dig.
Because Reddit actually existed at the time, and then Dig surged, and Reddit sort of didn't, and then eventually Reddit sort of did what Dig was doing, but better.
That's more or less what happened. Reddit was actually, I think, inspired by Dig. Basically, they were like, "Oh,
originally,
and I'm going to do it better." And then Dig ended up having its like MySpace or Friendster kind of moment, and then Reddit became the Facebook, right? So Reddit is the survivor, but Dig was actually the original thing. And you would submit stories and people would vote on it. And if it went to the front page, you'd get a lot of traffic. I originally found it as a young journalist because there was something called the Dig queue. You could go to dig.com/queue and you could see stories being submitted. And so I'd see all kinds of weird stories. And that was like a place where I'd look for story ideas. But then I submitted one of my own stories. First story I ever submit got to the home page. I'm hooked. And so this is one of my early experiences with online communities. I was actually ranked 48th on Dig in the world.
Really?
I was a top digger. And so again, this was like, to me, it was fascinating because it's like, this is media and journalism. This is the front page of the internet, but it's being decided by the community. It's being decided by the internet. And it was like the meshing of these two interests. So I go to New York. I'm really active on Dig, which got me a few other opportunities. I go to grad school part-time. And I think that was important because I was still working. And I worked for a place called Seed Magazine, which was like a science and tech magazine. Again, because of Dig, I'm submitting a bunch of things. I also end up working for something called a re-envisioned Netscape. Netscape also did a copy of Dig.
Oh, right.
I was a paid Netscape navigator, which was run by Jason Calacanis, actually, at the time.
Okay.
And again, I'm like 25 and they're paying me like $1,000 a month to like submit.
This is before he started weblogs?
This is after weblogs.
Okay.
But before like all in, if sort of the latest incantation. And then I also started working for a guy named Jay Rosen, who was an NYU journalism professor, and Jeff Jarvis, who was a CUNY journalism professor. So I went to Columbia, but I like to joke that I kind of went to all three major journalism schools in that area. And I was part-time, and this is where it got really interesting. Because I knew technology, because I was really fascinated with Dig, started working at the time into what I would call project management.
Okay.
So I was doing less journalism, less reporting and writing, and moving more and more. Now I call it product, right? I'm on the product side of the news business. But at the time, I didn't really have the language. But I was like, okay, we're going to build, again, CMS, a content management system. But to me, it's like, okay, we're going to build the system by which other people are going to use to publish. Started working on things like that in citizen journalism was the phrase at the time, just sort of experimental journalism projects. And that led to another project that you and I crossed paths on in a good way called Spot Us, but anyway, so that's kind of what happened in my mid-20s, so to speak.
So let's take us to, you pick the point, but when are you sort of moving out of grad school student into the what you yourself would pick would be the next phase of the career? Like where did you, beyond the tinkering, where did you land for at least a little while from your own perspective? And that could be doing 14 things at the same time. That's okay. But how did you position?
So I was doing the 14 things at one time during grad school. I was freelancing, Netscape, Navigator, journal working. And then as I was graduating, or I can't remember exactly when, but I will pick the thing. It was this Spot Us, right? So the Knight Foundation, which, is the result of the Knight Ridder company, which used to be the largest newspaper company. They sold a bunch of stuff. They created a foundation. They wanted to give money to spur innovation. This is around maybe 2007 or 8 now.
I would say, because I know where the story goes, I would say that it was almost like one of the first incubators or accelerators. That would have been the term they'd have used, right? Nowadays, it would have been like the Knight Foundation
Accelerator Program,
Citizen Journalism Accelerator Program or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Because who else is going to give money to like a 26-year-old kid with an idea, right?
Who knows?
But kudos to them. That's what it was. They said open call, any ideas.
Okay.
And again, in terms of life lessons, this is I'll go into a detail that I don't always go to, but there was the year before, it's the second year of this accelerator. The year before, somebody won doing grants to programmers to learn journalism. Like, hey, we'll give you a free journalism education if you're a developer.
Okay.
And I wrote a post. I was like, where's my grant to learn how to become a computer science? Like, why don't you, and the guy who ran the program saw that blog post, wrote me like 2 sentences in an email, said, great feedback. You should submit an idea. So now I'm like, okay, great. I will submit an idea. And I submit that idea. But I kind of knew like, they're not going to fund that, right? It's just like an FU kind of response. At that time, I was doing a lot of, again, this crowdsourcing, crowdfunding was early concept. And because one of the 14 things I was doing, I was the research assistant for a guy named Jeff Howe, who coined the phrase crowdsourcing. And in journalism, if you coin a phrase, you get a book deal. So he's writing his book on crowdsourcing, and I'm his research assistant. And I read a blog post, I remember distinctly, by a guy named Ryan Sholin. He worked for WordPress for a long time, really interesting guy. And while I was reading his blog post, my heart started racing. Because I was like, oh, he's writing about this great idea of a bunch of people putting money together to fund a journalist, right? Like, that's a great idea. It's related to all the things I'm researching. I go to bed that night, and then I wake up the next morning, and I look at the post again. I realize he was not writing anything about that. I just read into it.
Interesting.
And I just like projected this idea onto his post somehow. And then I wrote that idea down, sent it to Knight, and Knight, in all of their infinite wisdom, decided to give this 26-year-old kid who just had this idea, it was about $350,000 to start this project. So that was, and again, today it sounds kind of benign, right? But at the time it was a radical idea.
Sure.
Today it's Patreon or Kickstarter, but this is before Kickstarter. Can we get 50 people to all contribute a little bit of money each? And that adds up for enough money to then hire a journalist to do a story.
So that was Spot Us.
That was Spot Us, right? And so that was, at that point, I'm no longer doing journalism myself. I am now.
Was that the last time you would consider yourself a journalist?
No, I went back when I did Circa and AJ Plus, which was after Spot Us. I was doing some editing, but like that was like the clear, like I now understand this distinction and I can go between the two. And I'm firmly in the product side. But so it wasn't the last time that I was like, on the reporting and writing side, but it was the first moment in my life where I was like, oh, there's a whole field here. Essentially, like what I often say is technology companies and media companies are kind of, in a way, they're kind of the same thing increasingly. And so you just need someone who has journalism principles to build the technology products for them. Otherwise, you just have to hope a tech company builds it for them. And,
Right.
it's different principles, right?
So did you say 26?
I think I'm 26.
And you've been handed the proverbial bag of money to go off and do a thing. The times haven't changed that much. $350K is enough to get some things going, not everything going. You're not building out you're not rebuilding all of a dig. You're not, these days maybe you could prompt your way there, but
Right.
But who knows? So what was the first thing you did upon receiving the money?
I definitely had a shit moment.
Okay.
And because I remember I got a call from the President I Foundation, and he's like, he had this big gravelly voice, and I was like, oh gosh, now I have to do this. Like, it was a great idea, but
by the way, I picture that guy as like in a gray suit, like a big guy.
He was the former publisher, I think, of the Miami Herald, and big guy, big booming voice, intimidating voice, very nice guy. But yeah, he is probably the guy you're picturing.
Is he chewing on an old cigar?
Probably not during the phone call, but yeah, more or less.
Okay.
His name is Alberto Ibarguan. Really nice guy. Just stepped down from the Knight Foundation maybe a year or two ago. One of the things I did is I definitely collected myself, and I created this was the first time where I was like, I need advisors, I need mentors, and I reached out to a lot of different people, and I think there was a lot of benefit from that. Again, at the time, even then, you get conflicting things from different people, and so you have to manage that. And when you're 26 and two authority figures tell you conflicting things, it's you kind of have to figure it out. And one of the people that I reached out to was a guy named Jeremy Toeman, who at the time was running Stage 2 Consulting, I believe it was called.
That sounds about right.
Yes.
So since I don't know this part, why me?
Well, one, again, I trust. I mean, we had been friends, internet friends before everything, right? So it's like, and I do think this is something like most of the people I reached out to were in the journalism space.
Right.
And that's
I remember your advisory list was like Like, and by the way, for those not in the space, names like Jay Rosen and Jeff Jarvis, especially most of this century, have been particularly relevant when it comes to the underpinnings of tech journalism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was very lucky in the journalism space. And I hope this doesn't sound like I was pretty well connected because I had worked for Jay and Jeff. Like for Jeff, I had organized conferences. Dan Gilmore was another. In my space, those are big names, and I had them at my disposal. I don't say my disposal, but like they were invested and they wanted this to succeed as well. They were giving me good tips, but I was weak outside of journalism. I was weak on tech. I was weak on what I might call like marketing for sure, right?
Sure.
I wasn't going to go to Dan Gilmore to give me marketing advice, right? That's not what he's going to do. And so part of it was just like the diversity of opinions and the diversity of experiences. Because our friendship went back a ways, my very first internet friend, I kind of trusted your outside view on things.
Got it. And curious, if you could go now and whisper an advice on how to pick one more advisor, what would this David tell that David? Hey, go get someone who can help you with blank. Where was your blind spot?
It's a really, really good question. I mean, again, this is a nonprofit, so the sort of cheeky response is a really, really rich person. Like you need a benefactor. If I were to go back and talk to a 26-year-old David of an advisor, an MBA kind of business person, and not for, again, the 26-year-old would have been, I don't need help accounting. It's like, no, this is not about, right? This is about understanding product market fit, what the addressable market is. I have a buddy named Kezar Kampwala who ended up going back and getting
another great name. People with great names.
I know Kezar Kampwala. Shout out to him. And he got his MBA. He understands the way that you can do analysis on a business, And so obviously 26-year-old Kezar didn't have that, but I would want, someone like him back then.
So, okay, tell us briefly about the journey of Spot Us and maybe a key accomplishment and where it ended up.
The quick version of it is, again, it's a startup nonprofit, 2 strikes. It eventually, it does get acquired by American Public Media, which is like second to NPR, but they kind of just let it rot on the vine. And that was an interesting experience in that I saw what a failed merger and acquisition looks like, because the CTO at the time was really interested in Spot Us. I was like, oh, love it. We're going to do interesting. And me and him were like on the same page. It's acquired. And then I find out that the CTO and the CEO are not buddies. And the CTO quits when his staff is fired. And I'm actually the last person standing in his department. And they let me sort of hang out for like 4 months. And then I'm out the door and it does its thing. The coolest accomplishment from a journalism perspective, there was one story we did. We raised $10,000. We sent a reporter on a boat to the middle of the Pacific Ocean to report on the Pacific garbage patch. And that was published on the front page of the New York Times. That was kind of our big splash moment. The biggest thing that came out of Spot Us, actually, and I've thought about this recently, it was a magnet at the time for young journalists who were radical. Like I was thinking, there's a guy named Alexis Madrigal. He runs KQED now. He was at The Atlantic. He was an early Spot Us writer because it just attracted, I think, people like that.
Got it.
It sort of put me at the center of a generation, which was great for me. And I hope great for them, right? Like I wanted to build this to help them advance. I do think of my career as like albums, right?
Okay.
So like Spot Us was an album. That was like my debut album.
Can you take us through what the albums are really quick? I want all the albums.
I'll take them real quick. So when I was that's my freelance. I'm like, peddling on the street, like, for whoever will listen. Spot Us is my first like debut album. And it is about transparency in money in journalism. Circa was my next album, which was also like, in terms of albums, I'm really proud of it. Still, people talk about it. It was what I would call a critical success, but not a commercial success. The critics loved it. It was early mobile application of journalism. I was doing editing and stuff. We had a team. We were covering news 24/7. A really interesting way of producing news. After that was AJ Plus, which was kind of my pop album. AJ Plus was like, the sort of pivot to video, Facebook, text on screen. At one point, AJ Plus was, I think, 4th in the world in terms of video news on Facebook.
There was a window, and that was when you were there, when their brand was just everywhere. It was like, and I remember being very confused. I'm like, Are they, is this like some kind of a pivot? Is this, what's going on?
Pop album, again, it was almost in some respects, not that I want to belittle what we did there, but it's like the Circa was critically acclaimed commercial flop. This was commercial success. And again, if I look back at it now, I'd be like, critical. It wasn't bad,
but you weren't making stories like this common household ingredient could kill you and your family. Find out more tomorrow.
Right. Exactly. After AJ Plus,
it's your improvisational funk jazz blue period.
Sort of. That's I get hired by AdvanceLocal, where I've been for almost 10 years. And this is why it worked out so long. I'm part of the research and development team. So they call me up and they're like, hey, we want to build this R&D team. And I said, I don't want to live in New York at this time. I'm back in San Francisco. They say you can do it from San Francisco. So I built a few different, we'll call them mini albums almost, within those 10 years. The biggest one of those is Subtext, which
I would say this is the Subtext EP.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just letting you know, and anyone listening, there's, at this point in my head, there's about an 80% chance albums become part of my shtick, and I will give you the credit for them forever. But in the 20% chance, this will be the last time we ever speak of such a thing.
I actually love it as an analogy to like understand like people's.
It's great. It's really great.
Yeah. And so Subtext is a platform that lets news organizations or reporters text with their audience, and we license this out. Like the New York Times uses us, Washington Post uses us, San Francisco Chronicle, as well as again, from a business perspective, this is older. David was like, actually, let's not limit this. Like we work with car dealerships.
Just older David. We're now at current David.
Yeah.
This is the current album.
Well, there's one more recent album, or the one I'm working on now, which is Subtext now kind of is its own team. Like we grew that. It's 20 plus people now. I'm involved, but not in the day to day. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been doing generative AI with the newsrooms that AdvanceLocal owns and operates. This is like Cleveland.com, Cleveland Plain Times Dealer, New Jersey Star Ledger. I'm working with them on Gen AI tools to help them. But the sort of a singular album, because that is more like me as almost like a studio musician, maybe, or it's on tour, maybe. I don't know.
So the album is Advance Global, but I think it's almost more like it itself is a box set of a bunch of EPs.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Subtext was up until maybe 2 years ago. That's kind of the most recent thing, that like cohesive project.
Thinking about, using your analogy, thinking about the Circa album, which that's the critical acclaim, it's a collaboration with Bjork or something. And then following that with AJ Plus. Can you take us through a little bit of how did you decide to do each of those two things and why they went back to back?
It's a good question. So Circa was like experimental, right? Like experimental music in this. The idea of it was, can we take, rather than writing articles, can we strip out facts, quotes, statistics, events, and images and make them these unique things, thread those together to tell a story, and then the user could follow a story like you follow someone on Twitter or X, right?
Okay.
And people were like, wow, that's a crazy concept, right? And we were doing that by hand. I think about it today, how much easier it would be. In that spirit of like technology and journalism, this was like, like taking drugs and just going as deep down the rabbit hole as you could go, of just like, let's rethink everything. Like you're not even supposed to write an article now, right? Well, if I don't write an article, what am I supposed to do? It's like, well, we're going to tell stories that, evolve over time. And it was really cool. Again, it was written up, the New York Times at that time had done like and it was run by the Sulzberger, I forget his first name, the young Sulzberger, who now is running the place. He was in charge of like an innovation report. And their innovation report cited Circa and was like, what these guys are doing is crazy and might be, something interesting and something that we have to take note of. So it was really well received. But it was a classic startup in that we were raising money. We are working nonstop.
And so your role was specifically?
I was a chief content officer. So like I was like the interface that helped think through like what is a CMS for what we're trying to accomplish, right? I mean, I'm thinking through that. And then also running the editorial team, which was a 24/7 team, right? We were covering world news, and part of our value proposition was breaking news, because we could get something out so fast because we didn't have to write whole articles, right? We actually had someone from Wired writing about us that day when Robin Williams died, right? So,
oh, wow.
So someone yells out, Robin Williams dead. I was like, can we confirm it? We got it confirmed. We did it. We sent an alert on the phone, and we beat most news organizations in speed because they were all writing these words. All we had to say was, he's dead. And then we could come back and add more detail. In terms of the transition, it was super startup, classic startup, right? We're working real hard. I had a kid in the middle of it, my first kid, right? And, all of a sudden I'm like juggling. It was actually a great place to work, but it was difficult to manage all of that.
I've grown up kids. I'm running a startup. It's difficult to manage. I don't think you need to give any disclaimers.
Right. Yeah.
Startups are sort of impossible to begin with, and sort of so is being a parent in the 20s anyway.
As it started winding down and the reality of it set in, Circa was acquired by Sinclair Broadcasting. They essentially bought it for the brand and then eventually even shut that down. They did not use any of the tech or anything, which is a shame. And then it's sort of like AJ Plus, the folks at Al Jazeera, AJ Plus reached out. They had already kind of built a team and they were just looking for a leader.
Okay.
And the pay was increased and the lifestyle was more manageable. And it just seemed like, yeah, why not, right? It was a great opportunity. And again, because they had already had a team, it hit the ground running. You kind of talked about it, but it really was like a rocket ship for there was 2+ years where it was a rocket ship.
So what happened that made you want to leave the rocket ship and go to AdvanceLocal?
One was that distinction that we talked about of reporting and writing and product. I very much was leaning towards product. That's really what I wanted to do. And at AJ Plus, that's not what I was doing.
That was the last gasp of your reporter self?
It was. That was the last gasp of my reporter self. That's a great way of putting it. This is before the 2015 election, but it's leading up and you can almost sense that things are getting more and more. And I was so glad that I was not doing editorial from 2016 to 2020. I'm glad that I was not, doing reporting and writing. I don't know if I had enough energy in me. And again, in retrospect, I was a good reporter. I was a good writer. I was an okay reporter. I'm good at what I do now. I'm really, I feel confident in my ability on the product side of media and journalism.
Would you say that the journalist time, the reporter time, was essential for you to be the product person you are today? Or is there a version of life where maybe, you'd taken a different class in college and instead of that aha moment at, after school where it's oh, writing's cool and et cetera, is there any version that you think, you might have shortcut that? And would you have wanted to now in retrospect?
No. And I'll tell you why, because I don't work on any products in technology. Right? Maybe there is a world where I, was really into product itself and I could have done it for Farmville or for the next version of Tetris, right? There's a lot of those. And again, if that's your passion, I'm not trying to squash it, but I would, sort of find that personally soul sucking, right? So it's not just product. And in truth, there are parts of product that I hate, right? The project management element of it, keeping, all that is not what excites me. What excites me about it is having created this new thing, which is a kind of statement to the world about how media or journalism can or should function. I've mentioned this word CMS, and this applies to all product, but I always tell people who are interested in what I do, the CMS is your first editor. So while I am not editing anybody anymore, line editing, I actually contribute to what they can or can't produce by building the infrastructure that allows them, that kind of dictates in a way what is or isn't possible.
Love that. Using the framework, there are albums left to record, right? We have your improv opera album left to go, your written slam poetry album, etc. If you could design what your next few albums might be, and I'm not saying you have to pick a company, but if you want to, you can. Could you already quickly run out the next three? I'm definitely going to do these 3 albums.
There's definitely something a theme that's been on my mind right now because of this generative AI stuff. It's a remake of, I'm re-recording my old albums with new technology, right? It's going to be crisper sounding because I do look at what we did at Circa and also even things again, at the time, what was citizen journalism. And I think generative AI changes. I mean, when I think about what's possible now and I look at what we did then, I was like, oh my gosh, you could do this 20 times better today, right? Having the audience send in input I mean, the simple version of it is comments, right? Like our organization, we actually don't allow comments on our site because it was just impossible to moderate.
But comments make the internet so much better in every way. Anonymous comments, I mean, I love it. Did I ever tell you this? When you were my guest intern, I had the chance to do a guest post in Engadget back when they were like the hottest thing, and it was like this big opportunity. And I remember Ryan Block was the EIC at the time, and he said, I was writing a post all about place shifting. It was just after I had left Sling Media. We were the pioneers in place shifting. We literally invented it.
Yeah.
And he said to me, is right before the post went live, he's like, "Don't read the comments." He's like, "Just trust me, just skip them.
It's not worth it."
It's one thing for us to manage them, etc. But for you, you're not going to want to deal with all this.
Right.
The first comment or maybe not the first, but the comment I remember was someone writing, "Where does Engadget get these clowns? Why can't they find someone who knows what they're talking about?" And that's when I stopped reading the comments.
But you're right? Like they're usually never worth it. But now I imagine a world where we turn them on. They're not published. They're just ingested, and then we use that to produce something. One, it takes away the trolls, right? Because it's like you're not going to get published, right? And if there are trolls, we just filter it out. It's super easy now, right?
Okay.
And we can actually ask a provocative question, like again, I'm making this up, right? What do you think the mayor should do in response to X, Y, or Z? Sure. And take all that, and instead of having to find someone to write an op-ed, we can actually do a community op-ed. The op-ed is written by the community. And again, that's something that we did versions of that, but they were done by hand. I mean, like you had to read it, you had to think about it and figure out how to combine all these ideas. I mean, we could do that at scale now, and probably better than when one person was like really heads down on it. So I do want to look back at different concepts that we had, because again, that's what I've always been interested in, and think about
the AI-powered remix album.
It's a remix album. So a part of me, and hopefully that doesn't sound uninspired, but it is inspired by the current technology. And I'm always just like, oh my gosh, if we could take Circa and power it right now with generative AI, what would we do?
I think that's the right way to think. One of the things my friends and I always rant about is, why do they keep remaking movies we love instead of remaking movies that just sort of weren't quite right? And my current example is the movie. Do you ever see the movie Hancock with Will Smith and Justin?
Yeah. When he's like a superhero, like he's like
it's a mess of a movie, but it was a great premise. Like the drunk superhero, like just literally reboot Hancock. Don't try to remake whatever other thing I love that I'm sure they're off remaking right now. Right. So I love the idea of the remix, especially on the near misses, right? I think about that, like even my last startup with digital around TV and movie discovery. Like I think Letterboxd does amazing stuff, but I still think about like, well, what's not being handled there? So if your next album's the AI remix, is there one or two after that you already know, the autobiographical piece, the thing for the kids?
Right now, that's where my head is at, is the remixes of things like Circa and what I'll call like community engagement. Past that, it's hard to see. I mean, at that point, I start thinking more about like my career arc. And so it's much more like, where does David want to be rather than what is David going to build? Once you talk 3 years out, it's sort of like, I have no idea. I might have to remix, right? And I don't totally know of like, do I want to stay a musician or do I want to be a music producer, to use this tortured analogy, right? Circa was probably the biggest startup swing in my career. And I don't know do I have another venture like that left in me or not? Because again, for the last 10 years, I've been working for a larger company. They've given me creative freedom, which is like great. There's this dream big kind of thing in the back of your head sometimes. But again, having gone through it, and you have as well, right? It's like, how many of these do I have left in me? I don't know. So that might be another question that is at some point I have to address.
David, first of all, the framework and the analogy of the albums just made this whole conversation an absolute delight. I had you in mind to have on this when I was first sort of envisioning I'm going to do this podcast. Right away, I had this little note. I'm like, David, my first internet friend, but also your journey, and not just what specifically you have worked on and done, but the contributions toward storytelling that still live on in so many different ways has been really, really fascinating to watch. I've loved watching you from afar. Every time I see you on LinkedIn, it's like I knew, that little kid, and here we are today.
In our relationship, it is fair to say, like, you have been so generous to me. And I think it's worth, while it's being recorded as well, like, because again, I was like a snot-nosed punk kid who didn't know, who was faking that he knew technology when we met, right? And throughout every step of my career, including what you're doing right now with this podcast, it's like, I think the way that you approach these things by being generous, I think it is, again, one of the reasons why I think we've stayed friends for 20 years now through the internet and in real life. Again, I want to thank you for thinking of me, and for, again, every time we interact, I always feel like there's a sense of generosity from you.
Well, thank you. That's very, very kind of you to share. I'm so Canadian that I really don't even know how to respond to such a nice compliment, but I'll just say thank you for it. So thank you for that. But most importantly, thanks for spending a little time with us today. We'll see what albums we have in store.